All right, so today we're going to continue on with what we started yesterday. Yesterday we just did parabolas in the standard form with the vertex at 0, 0. So when the vertex was at 0, 0, our vertical one was x squared equals 4py. When it was horizontal, it was y squared equals 4px. So now we're going to translate it, and the amount we're translating it in the x direction is going to be h, and in the y direction is going to be k. Notice on this one, though, on both of them, they're being subtracted. So you're used to thinking of k as being the same sign as what it normally is in the form, but here they're both being subtracted. So you're having to figure out what would make the things in the parentheses equal to 0, or in other words, they're the opposite. So your vertex is always going to be at HK, whichever it is, horizontal or vertical. Just remember that the K is always with the Y, and the H is always with the X. So if you want to know your X coordinate, you got to find X in the equation. If you want to know your Y coordinate, you got to find Y in the equation. So for example 1, we've got y minus 3, the quantity squared, equals 8 times the quantity x plus 2. So we've got the y being squared. So is this one horizontal or vertical? It's horizontal. And if I look at my 4p, it's positive. So is this going to be going in the positive x direction or the negative x direction? It's a positive, so it's going in the positive direction. So it would be going to the right. And if I look at my equation, my h is actually with the x, and the k is over here. So my vertex would be at -2, +3. So at this point, it's going to be easier to figure out everything if I just start graphing. Well, I need to figure out p first. Let's see here. So the 8, that's my 4p. And so I know p has to equal 2. So now I'll go over to the graph and I'll do the vertex at -2, +3. We said that this one is going horizontally to the right. So from the vertex, I'm going to go horizontally to the right 2 spaces because p is equal to 2. And so my focus ends up being at 0, 3. So you have to figure out where the parabola is going to figure out where to put the focus. And then I'm going to go the opposite direction for my directrix. I go backwards 2, and I draw a vertical line for my directrix. And that's the line x equals -4. And your axis of symmetry goes through the focus and the vertex. So the axis of symmetry is y equals 3. And so at this point, I know it's curving that direction. I can just sketch the graph of the parabola. So for these, I'm not worried about you plugging in points. You can just sketch the graph just so you have it going the right direction and you have your focus and your directrix in the right place. Okay. Questions? How did I find the directrix? Okay, so I started at my vertex, which was at this point here, and because I know that it's going horizontally to the right, I know that my directrix has to be to the left. And it's the same distance as the focus. It's that p distance of 2. It's just I have to go the opposite direction. So going in the opposite direction, and then I just draw a vertical line through that point. Yes? I don't know. No. It doesn't matter. I don't care if you draw the directrix dotted or solid. Either one's fine with me. All right, so on your whiteboards, I'm going to have you guys do this one. So think about where it's going. Which thing is being squared? Y. So notice it's on the other side. They kind of messed with you a little bit on this one. So if it's y squared, it is horizontal. And your 4p is positive, so it's also going to the right. So you're going to find your vertex, the p-value, the focus, the directrix, and the axis of symmetry. Okay, so we found that the vertex was at 3, 5, right? And P is 12 divided by 4 or 3. So if I go to my vertex at 3, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we're going horizontally to the right, and I'm going to go 3 units because that's what P is. So 1, 2, 3, there's my focus. So I know my parabola is going to be like this, right? So where's my directrix have to be? On the other side by 3. So I go backwards 3, and it actually is right on top of the y-axis. It's the line x equals 0. And our focus, the coordinates end up being 6, 5. And then the axis of symmetry is right here at y equals 5. Let's see here. I think we have time for you guys to practice one more of those. So on your whiteboards, you're going to do 2 times the quantity y minus 4 equals x minus 6 squared. So think about if it's horizontal or vertical, if it's going up or down. Okay, so this one was vertical and going up. So if you start at your vertex, you found that P was a half because 2 divided by 4 is 1/2, right? So you just have to go up half of a space to get to your focus. So it's at 6, 4.5, and the directrix is y equals 3.5. Okay. Questions? Did we all get there pretty much? Mostly? Okay. All right, so now we're going to write it in standard form. So I'm just going to use the graph to help me figure out what's happening with the parabola. If you can figure it out just by looking at the numbers, you're welcome to do that. I guess I just tend to be more visual, so. All right, so I'm going to plot the focus and the vertex. So -6, 4. So there's my vertex, and my focus is at -6, 5. So that means it's going vertically, right? And it's going up. So P is positive, right? P has to be greater than 0. And so P is just the distance between the vertex and the focus. So how far up did I go? 1. And I went in the positive direction, so it's positive 1. So since it's vertical, that means it's an x minus h squared equals 4p y minus k. So I just plug in what they gave me. The vertex h is -6, so it's going to be x plus 6 squared. And then 4 times 1 is 4, and y minus 4. And that's your equation. So like I said, I'm not actually graphing it, I'm just using the graph to help me figure out what's going on with it. Questions? All right, so here's one for you guys to do on your whiteboards. The vertex is at 5, -8. The focus is at 3, -8. Okay, so if you look and see what's changing, the x changed from a 5 to a 3. So some of you I know can just visualize in your head, okay, I'm changing in the horizontal direction. But if you can't, it's okay to graph it. And like I said, I tend to be more visual. So if I go, I'll just use the graph up above. I've got 5, -8 is here, and my focus is at 3, -8. So I went in the negative direction. So it is horizontal, but it's going to the left. And because of that, that means that P is negative, because it's going in the negative x direction. So P ends up being -2 because we moved back 2. So then because it's horizontal, I know it's a y minus k squared equals 4p times x minus h. And so then you just plug in the vertex for your h and k. And so it becomes +8 because minus a negative. And so y plus 8 quantity squared equals -8 times x minus 5. Okay. All right. Sometimes they're going to give you the directrix, though, instead of giving you the vertex. So if that happens, we just have to kind of think the opposite way. So again, I'll just graph it real quickly so I can kind of see what's happening. My vertex is at -2, -5. And my directrix is at x equals 1.5. So 1.5 would be right about there. And so my distance is 1, 2, 3.5. Because the directrix is on the right side, I know that my parabola is actually going to the left. I didn't give myself enough room. And so this one is horizontal, and P has to be negative. So again, it's a y minus k squared equals 4p x minus h. So y minus -5 becomes +5. 4 times -3.5 is -14. And then the x minus -2 becomes x plus 2. The distance going from -2 to 0 is 2, and then here was 1.5, because it's x equals 1.5. So it's a total distance of 3.5. Okay, any other questions? All right, let me give you guys one to do yourselves. Actually, you know what? In the interest of time, I think I'd rather have you practice the next thing a little bit more than this, because this is the same thing as the other. It's just the directrix instead of the focus. I want to make sure I have plenty of time to cover this. All right, so when we write this, to get the equation into standard form, here it's been multiplied all out and everything's been combined and it's not in standard form anymore. And so first I've got to figure out, well, which one is it? Is it a y squared or is it an x squared? This one is a y squared. So I'm going to get the y's on the left side and everything else on the right. So I'm going to have y squared plus 2y, and I'm going to leave myself some space because I'm going to complete the square. On the other side, I get -20x minus 61. So I'm trying to get to where it's y with a number being squared, right? If I want it to look like the standard form. So I've got to complete the square. So to get me to y plus 2y, do you guys remember what you do when you complete the square? What do I do to that 2? I cut it in half. And then I square it, because if I was to actually take y plus 1 and square it, it's not going to equal y squared plus 2y. What's it going to equal? Y squared plus 2y plus 1. And if I add 1 to the left side, I have to add 1 to the other side. So complete the square is the second step. All right, and I'll go ahead and combine my like terms on this side. So now I've got minus 60. And so the last thing is I need to have my 4p out in front, right? I still want to have a parentheses with the x to figure out the rest of the vertex. So I'm going to factor out the 4p. In this case, the negative 20, right? So I've got y plus 1 squared equals negative 20 times x plus 3. Because we're dividing them both by negative 20, right? So that's how we end up with the plus 3. So your final answer then is y plus 1, the quantity squared, equals negative 20 times x plus 3. And now we would be able to graph it and figure out where the vertex is and everything. So here's one for you guys to try. Which one's being squared this time? X's. So we need to get the x's on the left side this time. So first thing is, be careful when you add the 6y and the 3 to the other side. Some of you are making mistakes with the signs. And then the other thing is, just maybe you need to go back and review completing the square a little bit. What you want to think about is, what do I multiply? I want the same thing multiplied together to give me the minus 6x. So what has to be in that parentheses to get the minus 6x? Minus 3 and minus 3, right? And if I multiply that out, I get x squared minus 6x plus 9. So what's missing from my perfect square? The plus 9. So that's what we're adding to both sides. So I rewrite that in the factored form, x minus 3 squared equals 6y plus 12. And then I just factor out the GCF, right? 6, and we get y plus 2. Okay? All right, you guys have time to do one more, just to make sure you got this down. All right, so we got the y squared and the 14y, and so what's going to be in my parentheses? Y plus 7, and 7 squared is 49. So we end up with negative 8x plus 16. So we're going to factor out the negative 8. So sometimes it might help you if you write that down, so that way you'll get your signs right. A few of you were making mistakes with the signs. And you end up with x minus 2 in the parentheses. But looks like most of you guys got it. Any questions? That's it for today then.